Welcome back to Historical Places and Mundane Spaces. This is the Jordan crossing, where the Donner Party crossed the Jordan River here in Utah. Now it's an industrial park.
Today we're on the very south side of Salt Lake City. Right behind me is the Jordan River. Standing right here in front of me are a bunch of warehouses. This is a huge warehouse district, all kinds of shipping for trucking and rail. A very mundane space, but also a very important historic spot. This is the crossing of the Hastings Cutoff of the California Trail. The Hastings Cutoff is the route that the Donner Party took in the summer of 1846, and it's part of the reason that they got stuck in the Sierra. But the story is them coming down out of the Wasatch Mountains, which are just to the east here, taking days and days and days and days and days and days to get through the Wasatch, and they finally make it down here, only to be greeted with the big marsh on the other side, then the mountains, and of course the Great Salt Lake is just off to the north here. The Jordan River here flows to the north, just like in Israel, where, you know, the Jordan River there flows from the Sea of Galilee into the Dead Sea. Here it flows from Utah Lake north into the Great Salt Lake. So this is a really important crossing for the Hastings Cutoff, named for Lansford Hastings, who convinced the Donner Party that this is the route that they should take west. James Reed, who was with the Donner Reed Party, one of the more famous members of the Donner Reed Party, wrote in his journal from here on August 23, 1846, "Left camp late this day on account of having to find a good road or pass through the swamps of the Utah Outlet. Finally succeeded and encamped on the east bank of Utah Outlet, making 5 miles. Also being the Jordan River, this is part of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers flood control projects. We do have a historic marker that was here on the levee, but we can't have obstructions here on the levee, so it's been moved back towards closer to the warehouse right now. It's not actually installed, it's just kind of leaning up against a tree, but the diary quote that I read from James Reed is actually on that. It's a split T-rail marker made out of the steel from a railroad crossing with a plaque attached to it. So if you come here and you look for it, it's directly behind the warehouse leaning up against a small tree. Today we're at First Encampment Park in Salt Lake City. This is the first encampment of the Mormons when they arrived here on July 22nd, 1847. They had spent most of 1846 and 1847 traversing by a wagon from Nauvoo, Illinois, wintering in what's now Omaha, heading on into the Salt Lake Valley in the summer of 1847. And this park today was the first encampment of those original Mormon pioneers that headed west in 46 and 47. Today, this park is located right across the street from a Subaru dealership. There's a 7-Eleven, there's a coffee shop, there's a few other little stores, and it's basically in a neighborhood. It's just a busy intersection here on the south side of Salt Lake City. So this truly is a historic place in a mundane space. Today we're in front of the home of Wilfrid Woodruff. This home in Salt Lake City was built in 1849-50. Wilfrid Woodruff was among the first Mormon pioneers to come to the Salt Lake Valley in 1847. He would go on to become the 4th president of the church, and was probably most famously known as the person who ended the practice of polygamy. This was his farm. Today it's a neighborhood. It was a 20-acre farm at the time. He lived here until 1890. If you live here, it's not a mundane space, but it's not what you would normally think of as a really important historic site. But this was one of the first homes built here. It was a 2-story log cabin. It's been stuccoed. The inside, you can really tell that it's a cabin, and we'll have some images to show you from in there as well. Welcome again to another episode of Historic Places and Mundane Spaces, and today I come to you from the east side of downtown Salt Lake City at the grave of Brigham Young. Here we are surrounded by several apartment complexes, an old historic home just to the east of Temple Square in Salt Lake City, and the reason for trail people why we're here with Brigham Young is he actually led the first group of people across the plains from Nauvoo, Illinois, through Council Bluffs, Iowa, and Omaha to the Salt Lake Valley in the summer of 1847. They actually left in the winter of 1846, wintered in the Omaha, Council Bluffs area, and made their way west. And this is where Brigham lies. Brigham had taken over the church after their founder, Joseph Smith, was murdered in Illinois, and it was one of the reasons they decided to head west, to come out here to this basically what they viewed as Zion, a place where they could come and grow their religion. Over the next 22 years, innumerable wagon trains from Mormon people from all over the world. They were recruiting in Polynesia, they were recruiting in Europe and Africa, and people were coming through New York and New Orleans and across the Overland Trail. But the really interesting thing about the Mormons is they decided to stay on the north side of the Platte River. The established Oregon-California Trail was on the south side of the river. They didn't really want to compete for forage. They'd had a lot of trouble with people that weren't Mormon, so when they got to Fort Bridger then, they continued on the Hastings Cutoff, which was the route that the Donner Reed party took. The one deviation they made, the Donners and Reeds had gone up what's called Donner Hill. They decided to cut through Immigration Canyon and arrived about where This Is the Place Park is located today in Salt Lake City near the zoo. That's generally regarded as the end of the Mormon Pioneer Trail. But here we are in this historic, very historic place in a mundane space, the grave of Brigham Young. Today, I'm on the east side of downtown Salt Lake City in kind of a quiet neighborhood just off Temple Square, surrounded mostly by apartment buildings. But here is a Mormon handcart memorial to the Mormons who crossed the plains to Salt Lake City with handcarts. And handcarts, as you can see from this sculpture, is basically a glorified wheelbarrow. You literally had to pull your belongings. Only about 5% of the Mormon pioneers who came this way between 1847 and 1869 with the coming of the Transcontinental Railroad traveled this way. And they were mostly European settlers from England and Wales and Scandinavia and places like that. 1856 to 1860 were the primary years that handcarts were used. Most of the other time they were either on foot or with wagons. Two of the handcarts really met with a disaster in 1856 during the winter. They got kind of a late start off the Missouri River, the Willie Handcart Company and the Martin Handcart Company. About 210 of the 980 people with those companies perished in Wyoming in snowstorms and bitter cold. But here we have a really nice green, lush park on the east side of downtown Salt Lake City commemorating these hardy Mormon pioneers. Today we are just on the east side of downtown Salt Lake City, actually just down the hill from the state capitol at the Crimson Mill site. This was the site where Charles Crimson built the first flour mill right here on what's called City Creek, which is right here in front of me. It's channeled today, but in the 1840s there would have been a mill here. The earliest Mormon pioneers who left Nauvoo, Illinois in 1846 and made their way across to Iowa and Nebraska and Wyoming into Utah brought grain with them. And they sent an advance party to get a grist mill set up, which they set up right here to grind the grain to feed them over the first winter. So this commemorates the site where Charles Crimson built the first mill. Today this city park follows City Creek well up into the mountains to the north of us. It's a nice stroll through a nice quiet neighborhood in a historic place in a mundane space.
I'm here with historical places in mundane spaces. I'm at an apartment building that used to be modern, maybe still is. It's been here since the 1960s, and most of the people that are living in this apartment building don't even know that there's a historic marker right at their feet because they're sitting atop the famous Donner Hill on the Pioneer Trail. The infamous Donner Party came down this canyon that you can see in front of you. It wore them out and they had to lift their wagons over this hill to get out of the canyon before hitting the more arduous part of their trail in the salt flats.
Join OCTA today. Come stand in the snow and look at plaques. It's fun, I promise. So this is not how it would have looked for people coming out here. What time would they have made it out here, Travis? It would have been August?
Typically, yeah, they would have been here around August, and it would have been mostly boiling hot.